in the long run. And Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to look at this bill that my colleague has introduced, to look at the savings, to think about what our future is going to be here in Nova Scotia. We keep talking about this silver tsunami. We keep talking about the healthcare costs in the future. And I firmly believe, Mr. Speaker, that this is an appropriate place for an investment, particularly among those under the age of 18, because the sooner they get their type 1 diabetes under control, the better off these children will be. And those pumps really do make a difference for those children. So for the children like Aaliyah, and for the children like, I had parents just contact me the other day, and they're completely overwhelmed by this new diagnosis for their little girl, and they don't know where to turn. We can help those parents, we can help those children, we can help the future taxpayers of this province, the current and future taxpayers of this province, by in fact funding insulin pumps and quite frankly doing the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to stand this evening and speak to this resolution, the issue of funding of insulin pumps in order to mitigate future cost pressures on our healthcare system. And Mr. Speaker, first of all, I do also want to welcome the folks from the Junior Diabetes Research Foundation for being here. I want to thank them for a phenomenal job that they did on Ride for the Cure. They of course, every year have a fundraiser where a number of people get on these spin bikes and pedal their heart out for, what was it this year, 7 minutes? I think it wasn't very long. It wasn't very long. And those teams raise money for junior diabetes. And not only to help out here and there, it's to find a cure. To find, you know, here's the reason, here's the treatment, here's the cure for so many children that are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I do want to say, and you know, being in the House with all these people here, I would say that it was great to be a participant in that, that we did have a team in our second year in a row. And I think our number was 35 kilometers that we were able to travel on those spin bikes and in support of junior diabetes. And I can say I think the total number of funds raised was somewhere in the $70,000 range. Over $100,000, and I want to thank them for their input to the House. I know I'm not supposed to do that, and I do see the clerk rolling his eyes a little bit, but you know, sometimes you have to roll on your eyes there. You have to sort of roll with the numbers as they're presented to you. But $100,000 was raised from junior diabetes. And like I said, not just to provide aids or insulin or anything like that, but to really find a cure for diabetes. And I think that is a cause that is worth celebrating and thanking the folks for their hard work in doing that. Now, to go to the issue of insulin pumps, this is one that I've got to deal with over the last number of years during my time as Minister of Health, and one that 2 years later I'm frustrated to see no program available. And Mr. Speaker, the way I would look at it is this: you know, you can't as a government. Number one, I don't see the reason to have an act. We don't need an act. It's under the purview of the Department of Health to come up with any program that it may seem fit to help the health and well-being of Nova Scotians. And that is why, you know, after many meetings with the Canadian Diabetes Association, parents, families, IWK, and all that, that I felt at the time that it was very important to look at children and look at the possibility of insulin pumps for children. Because we know, you know, the way I look at it is that a number of individuals who are of a more grown-up age are able to manage their insulin levels and their disease much better than our young ones. And Mr. Speaker, most times it takes a whole team of individuals to take care of a child that has diabetes. Whether they're pricking the fingers 10 times a day, whether they're providing insulin 3, 4, 5 times a day in order to try to keep those children regular. And Mr. Speaker, I think it was at last year's Junior Diabetes Research Foundation Ride for the Cure that we heard from an individual that, you know, what did an insulin pump? She had an insulin pump. She was very proud to show it to you. And what did it mean to her? Well, it meant that she actually got to go to a sleepover, which is something she hadn't done. I think she was 10 years old. You know, can you imagine a 10-year-old little girl that, you know, for the first time was able to go to a sleepover? You know, things that we take to granted. What is normal? You know, this year the little girl that spoke, Neville McKay was the MC. And he asked her, you know, well, what do you have to eat? And she said, pretty much anything. And of course, you know that it's a very specialized diet that an individual with diabetes would have to follow. But with an insulin pump, you can sometimes cheat just a little because the insulin that's available to you is almost immediate in tuning it up, you know, increasing your amount or decreasing your amount depending on what you're eating or not eating. And it's an interesting calculation, I guess, as you go along. Mr. Speaker, like I said, during my time there, I worked very hard with the department to design a program for children, one that I know was on the cusp of being rolled out. And there was a ministerial change, then was a government change, and I have no clue the status of my idea and my program. And all I can say to the minister, that I know she'll get to speak in a few moments, to look at a phase-in. Start with a few children, start with the IWK program, and start rolling that out to the people that, of course, need the help. And I know it is always a monetary issue. I believe, I mean, an insulin pump can range $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So it's not, you know, we're not putting a pager on a kid. We're putting a very sophisticated piece of medical equipment, one that needs to be maintained and watched. So you really have to, you know, have something of quality on there, and that's why they are so expensive. But if this minister would say, you know, listen, we're going to start a pilot program. We're going to phase it in. We found a few, you know, I don't know what it is, $60,000, $100,000, and we're going to start looking at a program to see what the benefits are going to be for children. Then I think that would be a very laudable goal, because like anything, you do have to phase in a program. You can't imagine just say, all of a sudden open the floodgates and say everybody who has diabetes is going to get an insulin pump. Well, because, Mr. Speaker, that won't work either, because many individuals have different requirements when it comes to insulin, and those insulins are delivered in different ways, whether that's by pill, whether that's by injection, or whether that's, of course, by insulin pump. So, Mr. Speaker, we would support the minister in any development that she would be able to come up with within her department to help people requiring insulin. Mr. Speaker, how much more time do I have? I have a whole 3 minutes. My goodness. My goodness. I think I've used up all my good stuff. But Mr. Speaker, and you know, and I know we probably don't have to go for a full length of time, because we do support the idea of insulin and insulin pumps, and ultimately support the Junior Diabetes Research Foundation in their goal of eradicating diabetes for everyone, but most specifically for children, so that they can have their regular lives of being active and healthy, and being able to be just like all their friends. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank of course, the official opposition for bringing this debate forward, and we look forward to maybe more discussion, some comments from the minister. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member for Glace Bay on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to the House Mr. Stephen Beamish, who is a volunteer with the Juvenile Diabetes Fund and has taken the lead on insulin pump coverage here in Nova Scotia. Welcome, Stephen.
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to as well welcome our guests in the gallery and thank you for being here this evening. I think for what is a very important topic and an issue to discuss, and maybe this discussion will prove to be useful to all of us who have an interest in this. Mr. Speaker, we all know that insulin pumps are medical devices, as the former speaker just indicated in his discussion. And they're becoming increasingly popular, particularly, I think, for children with type 1 diabetes, but I know a fair number of adults who have them as well, who find them quite useful. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is currently one of 6 provinces that doesn't provide any coverage for insulin pumps. I believe that we, along with Quebec and Alberta, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Manitoba, are not providing insulin pumps at this time, which means that they are being provided in Ontario, BC, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. And to be frank, I don't know if the coverage in those other provinces go beyond children or children of a certain age or whatever, but I can tell members that this is a matter that officials in the Department of Health have been looking at. They've been doing a scan of what is occurring across the country and other provinces, and we're trying to learn from other provinces that have these programs what the experience has been. Mr. Speaker, I understand that there is good clinical evidence that insulin pumps, in fact, are very useful and cost-effective for a particular group of children with type 1 diabetes, but not necessarily everyone, and that information is just being generated, really, and being assessed. And so that's something that I would be most keen on seeing people in my department have an opportunity to examine and analyze, and to, of course, talk with families, talk with clinicians, talk with people who have a stake in whatever policy the Department of Health and the province of Nova Scotia ultimately has in place to assist people. And so for people who are keenly interested in this issue, we are in the process of gathering up all of that information and doing the analysis, and some options will be presented to myself as minister to look at in terms of what the policy in Nova Scotia should look like. Now, it is true that we also will look at the financial aspects of the costs of implementing a program. I'm given to understand that insulin pumps range in price from $6,200 to $7,000, and that they have a lifespan of about 5 years. And that in addition to that, there are supplies required that run between $300 and $350 a month. And so for a patient over 4 years, the cost could be between $13,000 and $18,800. In Nova Scotia, we have approximately 600 children diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, And so if we were to adopt a universal program for children, the 4-year cost of that program would be $8 million or $2 million a year. So it's not an inconsequential amount of money to have to identify and add to the base of the department's budget. I remind members here that Lucentis was a $4 million annual amount of expenditure, and the position I took on that was that we recognized the value of Lucentis. We wanted to provide it. We would work to find a way to afford it. And I think this will no doubt be the approach I will take to many new expenditures, will be to look at, first of all, what is the clinical information that tells me the effectiveness of this particular form of treatment. If it's effective, if it's going to improve people's quality of life and their wellness, that's my first priority as Minister of Health. And my second is to figure out then how I can sustainably add the cost of that particular therapy or treatment or service into my department's budget. And we take these matters very seriously, and we work very hard. I've known very many people who have had children with type 1 diabetes, and have in my own family children who have type 1 diabetes, and I am full of admiration for those families and the parents who provide just extraordinary, not just medical and health care, but all of the things that they do to ensure that their kids have normal lives, that they get to play sports or they get to go to camp, they have a positive experience in schools. And I know that that can be a challenge, you know, having a child that's insulin dependent in the school system with all of the things that occur in schools, like, you know, parties and all of the outings and activities and all of those things. It's just unbelievable, the challenges that proposes. And I know, Mr. Speaker, as a former teacher and administrator, you've probably come across this on many occasions. When I was newly elected, I had this wonderful woman come and do a field placement from her training program in my constituency office. And she was a single mom. She had a little boy who was just leaving daycare into his first year of school. And the anxiety that that mother had about transitioning her child from a child care center, who were very familiar with this child, who had grown very accustomed to his needs and his routines and the medication, into a school system that was very foreign to her. I remember very well the stress and, you know, the long period of transition to transition this child. And it's my understanding that insulin pumps, although they're not without, you know, some adjustment and some getting used to and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, they can make a significant difference. And so I'm very aware and I'm very sensitive to those considerations, and they will definitely formulate a part of how I look at the information my department brings forward to me when they give me the options that might be available to us on a go-forward basis. So I know my time is short. I know that in the absence of a program in the public system right now, there is a registered charity that helps families of children who can benefit called the Emily Fund, and I encourage anybody out there in cyberspace who are interested to contact my department, and we could probably help you make some contact with this. And in the meantime, I'm looking forward to hopefully not the too distant future to be able to assess what it is that we can realistically do within our fiscal framework on this very important matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wish to thank all the speakers who participated in today's debate. Obviously, one very deeply felt by the members who did participate. That concludes the business of the House for today.